So it's Friday afternoon.
Friday, end of the
are.
week.
Yeah.
It's been a fun, crazy week here.
Pretty crazy week.
Yeah.
Exciting week.
Yeah, we got some
Good
fun
one.
stuff going
Yeah,
on, so
for
it's
sure.
awesome.
So let's make sure that,
We're streaming here.
yeah.
How's everybody doing? Hope your weekend's going well. Are you going to go home and have a margarita or anything? Make sure you tell us what you're going to be drinking through the comments. We got it.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, look, and now we're even doubling up. Perfect.
All right, so good to go. So I'm Tony Zayas. This is Andy Halco.
Andy Halco, CEO of Insivia, and we've got another one of our Friday shows, episode number 3.
Number 3, this is it, the big number 3. So we are talking today about personas, correct?
Persona. So we talked last week about how you narrow down and prioritize a target market, which is so important for,
Absolutely.
I think we talked about a lot of different reasons,
Yeah.
narrowing where your focus was strategically, being effective on like time and money when you're doing marketing, and just more effective marketing because it can be much more focused on the message. So what comes after that is who are the people within those targets we're talking to,
Yeah.
and what do we need to know about them.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece.
Yeah, so really understanding who that audience is.
Yeah.
So, just to take a step back for a second, we're talking all about brand strategy here for the next, we've done it for the past couple of weeks, so we will be doing it further for several weeks. I want to encourage everyone to go to thevisiongap.com. There's a download there of the white paper, and you get a lot of great information that goes through everything we're going to be touching
Yep.
on. We're breaking it down piece by piece and looking really into each of the elements that go into that. But if you want the download, thevisiongap.com, and then also wherever we're streaming, feel free to submit comments, questions as we go. We're happy to take those. So with that, I think we
Let's
can
just
jump
dive
right into this one. Yeah,
personas,
talk about personas. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is another one of those pieces of brand strategy that's super important. So as we're going through and developing all of these different elements after these target audiences, which we just kind of recapped, it's really about personas and defining that. And for me, it's, if you're gonna be marketing to people, you're presenting them ads, you're talking to them, all of these other pieces, we want to know everything that we can to make sure that it fits what their needs and wants are. And so personas are one of those things that I just think are so important, that if you're a business and you have 0 personas, you've never written down, like, here are the people that we're targeting, their demographics, their titles, other information, like, that's such a key piece of business, whether it's for marketing or sales, customer service, or any of those.
Absolutely. And I think there's hesitation sometimes to define that persona. If there's one, or maybe a couple, that's something I was going to say, we should discuss a little bit. What does a company do? And they're saying, well, this is a persona, but also it includes some others. So sometimes there's some challenges to all of that. But what I was going to say is that sometimes companies have a hard time committing and saying, we want to narrow down and go after this person, because what about all these other people?
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Yeah, so there's one thing that we do in our process that isn't in our white paper, but really looking at researchers, influencers, and decision makers.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about researchers, those are the people that are going out and really looking for a solution. They're doing that initial list just to get a sense of who's the right person that they want to look into. Oftentimes this person isn't an expert. They don't have the in-depth knowledge that someone else might, so they're just kind of high-level looking.
Yeah.
Influencers are those people that pop in the room and put their opinion on a decision, but don't actually have the decision-making process. I always call it, I'm sure our IT guys will hate this, but your CIOs, your IT guys, you'll get that a lot of time if someone's buying a software product
Yeah.
or working with a marketing firm or even accounting or any of these.
Gotta get sign off.
Yeah, well, the IT guy walks in and says, okay, will that integrate with our systems? Is it built with this type of code base?
Yep.
Whatever the specific thing is, and they can destroy the deal in a second, or they can put their stamp of approval on it, but they're not necessarily the person that's truly making the decision and signing off.
Yeah.
So those are our influencers. And then the final group is decision makers. The people that truly, at the end of the day, are going to make that hard decision to say yes or no. And they want different information. So each of those audiences, researchers need different information. There's different things driving them versus influencers versus decision makers. And so really, once we know our target audiences, grouping them into those three can be really powerful and help us get a little bit more of a control over what our different personas are.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned IT as the example, because a couple of different places that I've worked at in the past, marketing and IT kind of always would clash, right? Because IT were always the guys that told us, well, you can't do this or that. And it was those infrastructure system reasons why that we couldn't integrate or whatnot. And so that was always, and so when I think about the whole concept of the vision gap, part of that, this is stepping back and a bit broader from our conversation today, but really everything we're doing here is really talking about alignment.
Yeah.
Because even that, you have to have teams aligned, right? So how do you get people to, move beyond the silos and start to connect the dots, and how do they play nice between one another, right?
Well, I'm thinking about your messaging and your marketing materials and all of that for the influencers, because a lot of people focus on the decision makers.
Absolutely.
They're thinking about their brand and they're thinking about their messaging and the materials they need to put together and the downloads on their site, and they're focused on the decision makers when a lot of times those researchers can be the first people that come in, and then the influencers, you want to have that data sheet that they can go download, or that integration guide or the API documentation. So thinking through those influencers is so important to messaging and marketing strategy and all these different pieces.
That's a good one. That example there, API documentation, that was one of the company I was talking about, one of the marketing technologies that we wanted to bring on board. They had awesome API integration, documentation, all that, and that was kind of what sold the deal to our IT team. That had always been really hard to get things passed and get them to agree on. But so they were speaking to that influencer there.
And today, security is the big one. You walk in the door, and everything software is such a huge piece of sales. We're buying software for everything. IT is the easy one. There are other influencers, and I want to put all the weight on those IT guys and make them feel bad about themselves, but there can be a lot. Compliance departments. You could be doing marketing, and an influencer is your CFO. Someone that comes in the door and maybe doesn't make the decision, but they're going to influence what the budget is. And so every business has these different types of groups, but that is a great place is to start, that we look at those target markets. So you're starting out and narrowing down, who, and then it's really these groupings, and then you've got specific people within the groupings that then we're going to take the next step and break a little bit more down in detail. I think we're kind of talking about this stuff already. The biggest mistake that I think most people do in developing personas is that confirmation bias piece. So, if you're into behavioral psychology, there's this, someone can listen to, someone talk for 10 minutes, and if they believe something, they're going to pull out the points that back up their belief, but they're going to ignore the ones that don't back up their belief. And so we're confirming our own beliefs by what we hear. And I think in developing personas out, and you're thinking about your target audience, it's easy for us to sit in a room and say, okay, this is what we believe, then go look at some data online or ask one or two of our favorite clients, and they give us feedback and we go, wow, that's exactly what I thought. But we kind of just confirm what we already believed rather than really going out and getting deep research or any of these.
It's kind of like that old saying, or I don't even know if it's an old saying, maybe it's something I just tell myself. But basically, any fact you want to prove, you can always go out and find the research to support it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and that's kind of what we look for, and that's what we're most in tune to, are the things that support what we believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'll go into and consult with a company, and you ask them about like the factors of their buyers, and you talk to the salespeople, and they'll tell you, well, I've talked to Joe at this and this. It's like they picked out their 3 favorite clients, that one they have good relationships with, and Joe's going to say exactly, probably what you're almost leading him to say anyways, versus really finding out what the truth is. And I think that's a challenge. And we actually had a client recently that I can think of that there was a part of their business that they thought was a core value and a big piece. And we went out and talked to the target audience. We literally went and called people on the phone and asked. And it was funny because most of those people didn't know what that thing was.
Wow.
And, and then just it wasn't that high on their list. And it's like, okay, well, one thing that you thought was your core driver and differentiator, most people when you talk to actually didn't know what the term meant.
See, and they're building messaging and
everything
around that.
Crazy.
So, yeah.
And that's our confirmation bias. And so that's the biggest mistake that I see people make is just assumptions. We're going into this process. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and do some huge research study. But I think going into the room and when you determine some of these factors, it's questioning yourself, making sure that everybody in the room has an opinion and that it's listened to, and it's not just, I hate to say it, the CEO comes in and says, I've been doing this 20 years, here's what I think, here's who our persona is, why they buy, and everybody goes, okay, we don't want to say anything against that, because you never know. It could be, we sometimes bring in like the person that answers the phones in the business. Because talk about the front line of someone that hears the problems and the complaints and the things that people like.
Yeah.
And I'll believe that person before I'll believe the CEO with 20 years. Cause,
much more confirmation bias.
Yeah. Well, he just built it in 20 years. Just kept piling it on till it's this like shell of just this is what I believe and what I've seen, and I'm not going to move away from it.
Sometimes you're too close to the subject matter.
Well, that's the biggest thing in like hiring consultants, and we have the same problem is we're so deep in our business, it's hard to, we have to bring somebody out from the outside to look at, and so that is a huge piece. But the next thing that I think is just huge, so there's a ton of information with personas, as you probably know. You could be looking at demographic, firmographic, psychographic, what are people's archetypes and all these different things. I'm a believer in simplifying the process. There are 2 things that I like to look at. 1, motivations. What's driving people? Why are they making a decision? And then 2, buying factors. What are the reasons that they're making a decision on? And so, there's a big difference. Motivations to me are much more like emotional, in your gut, like I don't want to lose my job. I want to make money for my family. I want to be proud and make myself look like an all-star to other people. I don't want to work as hard as I am, or I want to work less hours. It's that stuff that is truly like a emotional core driver to why people are either looking for something or why they're taking action or whatever it might be, that pain they're trying to solve.
No, I think emotions are, for most people, for most marketers, it's a little bit easier in the B2C world to really focus on emotions. I think people tend to have a harder time when it's B2B, but I always try to push people to really focus on emotion, because B2B, B2C, it's all human to human, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, everybody is driven. We're human beings. That's why we have wars and arguments and fights, because it's the emotional side that takes over and really controls. Now we justify everything with logic, but the motivational, the driver. So I like to consider just like Maslow's hierarchy of, just the
needs,
human needs, and look at what is it for Do they need recognition? They need to feel significance,
Yeah.
to feel part of something. And that works in a business setting as well for, how will it look to your boss if you deliver this project, on time, on budget, on point, et cetera.
They in behavioral economics have like the homo economicus or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect being that makes decisions fully on like all rational, it doesn't matter how this impacts me personally or other people. It's like, this is the right decision. And, everybody in that industry, in economics talks about that doesn't exist. There's no one that is like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we are just irrational beings. And if you're selling, I don't care if it's B2C or B2B, emotions and drivers and wants are as much a factor as the analytical, rational side of things.
Yeah.
And so
that model, the logical model, it sounds all good until it goes completely off the rails, and then what? Right?
Well, and the rational side is really those buying factors.
Yeah.
But what we have to do is make sure we're moving back to the motivations to understand why there's those buying factors.
Yeah.
I might say that, hey, I want great customer service from this company, but my motivation might be in the back of my head that I lead the IT department and I'm sick of all the people in the company calling me, with these issues, and I'd rather them call you.
Yeah.
And I have other better things to do. That's the emotional response is like, I don't want to be doing this and I can have better use of my time, or I'm tired of hearing complaints about using this software package that we have. And so the rational thing is he goes out to the company and says, do you have great customer service?
Yeah.
What's the levels? How often are people available? Sounds very rational, but there are some extremely emotional, personal drivers behind that.
So you're balancing the two with these two pieces, with motivations and buying factors. It's a balance of delivering kind of
emotional, rational,
why.
heart, mind. At the end of the day, and if we understand heart and mind, we can really help develop great messaging and marketing and all of these different pieces. And so that's where you get into the buying factors, or really it's those reasons that they purchase. I like to a lot of times think of, I've got different products or services or companies across my top that I'm looking at, and then down my left side I have some reasons that things that I want.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm buying software, buying factor could be customer service, security, all of that, and all the companies, and I'm check marking and saying, okay, these two companies have security, this one has great user experience, this one has good customer service, and it becomes a matrix for me. And so when I'm thinking about buying factors, I want to have the team sit down and say, okay, when someone's looking at your services, don't think about you either, what your features are. Think about if they've got 10 different companies, what are all the things that they're comparing you versus others against? And those are our buying factors. I think that the thing that people get into with buying factors that's difficult is they'll a lot of times focus on the buying factors that are beneficial to them. Mm-hmm. Our customer service is great, so that one's really powerful, and we've got to make sure we focus on it, versus maybe looking at something like security, because they're not great at security, so that's not as much of a buying factor. We have to be very, again, that confirmation bias or just bias to our own product.
And I think it's important, as you're saying, you're going to go through, buying factors are basically going to pair up a lot of times with features.
Right.
Whenever you have features, you want to draw out the benefits to the buyer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's super important, because those features really mean nothing. It's what's in it for me, and put that in. I mean, it's so easy to forget to talk, wholeheartedly to the prospect, to the buyer, about why this is the right solution for them.
And this really works B2B to B2C. B2C, if you're talking drinks, it's like, my motivation is that I'm thirsty or whatever it is, but my buying factor is it healthy, or is it something my friends drank, and whatever, can it give me energy? There are buying factors, but there's an emotional response. And so in B2B, you've got these two things. In B2C, you've got them. I mean, it just doesn't matter. There's always motivations, and there are always buying factors no matter what. And so that's why I say there's a lot that you can get together with personas, but these are the two that I really try and focus on.
Yeah, I think we could probably talk about this stuff for a long
Yeah.
time. There's so much to go into, but I think it's real important that, like you said, there's a lot of companies that just skip this part of the exercise, or they take the shortcut of just putting that really simple persona, their best, easiest customer. So maybe it's not, maybe the ideal persona to speak to and develop isn't the real easy one to bring on board, but the really great client that it's a little, the onboarding, getting them to that decision point is a little bit more difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because if we can convince that person, then the other one's going to be even easier, right?
Totally. Yeah, and I think, the other thing I see, like the standard marketing agency versus, where you're being kind of strategic consulting side. Standard marketing agency loves the picture of the person with the age, like a fake name and all this stuff. That stuff I throw away. It's like, I want to know my groupings, which we talked about last time. Like what are kind of the high level groupings, and then I want to know this stuff, because this stuff is what's going to drive my other pieces. We're talking about value propositions next week, how you differentiate yourself. These pieces are what's set up and have everything to do with how you determine your value propositions. If you haven't figured this out, to me, there's absolutely no way that you can truly figure out value propositions correctly. And so it's a necessary step. And value propositions, which are what makes you different in the marketplace and why people should buy, is the most important thing to marketing and sales.
Well, there's a relationship between those two, right? It's only relevant if you're speaking to these people, right? So the value proposition isn't an ultimate thing, it's a value proposition to an audience, and you have to define the audience or else it's not going to work. It's not something that's just a universal, and I think that's an approach that is taken at times, just that, it's a universal, that's the it's quality, right? We talked about that, right? It's like when people are giving it this critical thought and going in deep, they arrive at those type of value propositions, right? This is the way that we can truly draw out those really particular, specific things that will make us unique, that makes our solution stand out and resonate with the ideal buyer. So.
Yeah, and buying factors, we actually have a little exercise that we go into in depth where there is a very calculated way to help rank and prioritize the buying factors. So if you have a list of 20, there's actually some ways that you can compare, where do other people fit, and how does the market look to understand the priority of those buying factors.
And that's part of the kind of work that you do in the consulting side, right? Because I think we went through that exercise, and I think if you had a big group in the room, it's probably interesting to hear, others, on the team maybe that are chiming in, and you might, makes you think twice about some of those factors, because we all have our own biases as far as this is why, but then to hear from others, that's a really cool exercise.
Well, and I love bringing people in that are in different roles, because even thinking our organization, it's easy for me, you, and Dave, our leadership team, to sit down and talk through this stuff, but maybe bringing in like an account manager that works day in and day out with customers, they may have a different opinion. And so I think looking at this stuff not in a vacuum of a leadership team or who you think knows the most. We've got to go out and get some real information from customers, get some real information from people down on this street making things happen, and that's what it's about.
Kind of goes back to all the people throughout the process, the people answering the phones, the guy in IT or accounting. It's everyone in that process. We have to kind of consider all those different perspectives. So same thing is true when you're internally going through these, figuring this out. Getting other perspectives is good. If you're just in that
no matter what
echo chamber, that's not. It might feel good in the moment, but it's not gonna. That message isn't gonna resonate like.
It's great sitting in the room being like brilliant, but that's not the reality. It's brilliant because you said it. So definitely don't want that. So all about personas today, and I do think it's important. It's crazy to me if you're a company that you at some point haven't sat down and really looked at and talked about these pieces of a persona and defined them, because If I were a company, I'd have that, and I'd give it to every marketing person, every sales, every account manager, customer service, all those roles, because they need to know too, why are my customers doing stuff, and what matters to them. I mean,
that's where those disconnects come from when
Yeah.
they don't have that kind of information, because there's a lack of understanding within an organization.
Yep,
So-
that alignment piece that we talk about a lot is,
Yeah.
I always talk about in the vision gap is define, articulate. So define is just figuring out. Articulate is making sure you're, saying it in the right way and have the right information with it. Communicate,
Yeah.
and that's that alignment piece. Everyone in the company has to understand this, not just the 4 people that are in the management meetings.
Yeah.
And so you really, with the vision gap piece, if you have those gaps, the employees don't know it, and then you get gaps with prospects and customers, and definitely this brand and targets and personas is such a huge piece of that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, good stuff here today, Andy.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Thank you for tuning in once again. Again, leave us messages. Let us know what you think. If you have questions, if you have things you'd like us to address, just let us know. And a reminder to go to thevisiongap.com and get that download. It covers, this is just a piece of what it touches on. And again, we go in depth, and if you have questions, this is a good place for us to field those. So until next time.
Till next time, I'm going to have some margaritas this weekend, so hopefully you do too.
Sounds good.
And let's have some fun. See you guys. See you next week.
Take care.
Out.